Good. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a meeting of the Planning Board, and as customary, today is Tuesday, November 26th. It is 7:03 that we're starting, and as customary, I'd like to do roll call. Elise Torello. Here. Pam Rubinoff. Here. Joe Murphy.
Here.
Maria Mack.
Here.
Steve DeMasi.
Here.
Peter DeStefano.
Here.
And the chair is here. We have the consent agenda items as listed on the agenda that include approval of minutes from October 8th, regular session and work session, October 22nd, regular session, October 29th, joint work session with the Affordable Housing Collaborative, and other items that follow on page 2. Are we good with the consent agenda? Anybody want to
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
We have a motion from Maria, a second from Steve. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We also have a letter from Kenyon Law Associates on behalf of their client, Fairgrounds Commerce Park LLC, regarding their matter scheduled for November 26th. Today, we should request that the matter be continued to the January meeting. And I see Mr. Kenyon present. Mr. Kenyon, I'm also asking, does this letter, what was not part of the letter was an extension of the date, which would take it into January of 2020?
That's correct. For the record, I'm John Kenyon, attorney for the applicant. I omitted the request to extend the time for an approval. We can do that till February 1st, 2020.
Okay. Staff? Good.
And you realize that our meeting date is January the 28th.
Okay, you want to extend it more to give more time after that meeting?
Well, I didn't know if you were aware of that.
No.
So maybe to the
February 15th.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we would agree to an extension to February 15th,
February
2020.
15th. Staff, good. Any comment from the board? Can we get a motion?
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Steve. We have a second from Maria, which would extend, or number one, take this off the agenda for today, place it on the January 28th calendar, and also the extension date would run through February 15th of 2020. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kenyon. Item number 2. Item number 2 is preliminary plan review, major land development project, marina and shellfish hatchery operations. And we have counsel at the podium.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Elizabeth Noonan. I represent the applicant in this matter on the continued preliminary plan for this matter. Since we met last month, we submitted a complete set of plans to you with revised landscaping. If you have my cover letter of November 15th, it goes through the changes, but I think we'll just get right to the heart of it. I have John Carter here, have him go up and have him walk through those changes that were made in response to the comments from this board. And as always, when we work on these plans together, I think it has come out better. So, John. And just focusing in on the landscape plans for L1, L2, those were the only changes that were made to the plan aside from showing the correct revision dates. And John has taken L1 and has marked it up. Hopefully we'll be able to pull it up here. If you can blow it up. I have paper copies if anyone wants it, or this one here. It's up to you. Do you want me to hand out paper copies of this?
Anybody like a paper copy, or is this sufficient for anybody?
Good. Great. And all we've done, again, is take L1 and color code it. So, John, if you could just walk through the changes that were made since we were here last on the landscaping.
Yes. My name's John Carter. I'm a registered landscape architect. I've been working on this project for a couple of years now. At the last meeting with the planning board, we left with 4 specific requests to look into, and just to be able to identify those clearly, I just marked up the plan. So this plan, which is L1 of the sheet set of 1 and 2 that you reviewed at the last meeting, we've revised it, and the northeast corner that I'm pointing out with a cursor that's got blue around it of the proposed hatchery building, we're asked if we could plant something there to help screen some of the view of that building from across the little breachway there. So just to reiterate, some of the discussion at the last meeting, we talked about the difficulty in taking the ordinance as it's written and applying it to what's essentially a commercial waterfront. And secondly, the climate and the environmental conditions, what actually we thought would grow and survive, so without a whole lot of care. So basically the plant palette included red cedar, bayberry, a lot of switchgrass, and so in that area that's circled in blue, we have a bed of switchgrass of a variety that gets up to 8 feet tall, and we put it over in that corner. It's kind of the only place it would fit in that area. And then the second thing we addressed, there was a lot of discussion about the sensitivity of the salt pond and the runoff into the salt pond, and if there was anything we could do to help mitigate that. So one of the things that was brought up were rain gardens, and I know a few of the board members talked about that. So the areas that are circled in red were actually plantings that were being proposed as part of the interior landscape requirements. But we've redesigned them to act as rain gardens. And just, I know most of you know, but just to be clear on the record, the rain garden is just simply a depression 8 to 12 inches deep with a soil amendment on the bottom, and then it's planted. It functions by collecting the first inch of runoff, if it's sized that way. But the runoff goes into it, it infiltrates through the soil. The amended soil has certain biological properties to help break down pollutants, and then if you select the right plant, and we selected switchgrass, it actually uptakes some of the pollutants and breaks them down. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 areas that are proposed to be developed as rain gardens. And over on the lower left side of the plan, we have a detail, and we have some rather specific notes on soil amendment and how the rain gardens to be constructed. Rick St. Jean, the engineer for the project, can speak to this later, but there's really no grading proposed on this. It's just a gravel lot right now. But in order to get these rain gardens to actually do anything and be helpful, there's going to have to be some grading to direct some of the water to go into those. And then the third thing we were asked to do was along the perimeter of the parking area where it abuts the pond, if there was any way we could get additional planting in there. So basically this stretch that is yellow and this stretch that's yellow has a rock revetment, and there's no real formal edge to the parking lot. It's just gravel, so the gravel and the boulders kind of blend into each other. But looking at it, it would make sense that we could plant. We could do pocket planting in around those boulders. So we propose planting more switchgrass along there. Again, it's a good choice. It's native, it's hardy. It'll take a little bit of inundation with salt water, and it'll take the conditions down there, and it works to attenuate pollutants. Then the fourth thing that we were asked was to address the potential for any runoff down the boat ramp, which I'm pointing at now, into the pond. So we've proposed a berm 4 inches high and about 4 feet wide, which would act as, if any water did get in that direction, it would divert it and run it down to the southeast, where it would either go in the rain garden or it would be taken up by some of the perimeter planting. So, it's by no means suggesting that we're mitigating all the runoff off this thing, and I don't know that we even could. There's nothing now doing anything to help with that, so it's certainly, in my opinion, a substantial improvement over what's out there.
I have,
Is what? Oh, it's 4 feet wide? Yeah. It'll be 4 feet wide, 4 inches high, and maybe 10 or so feet long, whatever the width of the...
and will that berm be grassed?
No.
What's the material?
I think it would probably be, it would have to be something solid, either, you could build it out of the gravel, I don't know if it would last, maybe it would be concrete or asphalt.
So, Mr. Carter, the question on the landscaping that's planned in the Succotash Road right-of-way, what's the maximum height the plantings you have selected is going to reach?
Maximum height?
Yeah.
Well, the maximum height would probably, it's just bayberry and some red cedar and the switchgrass. So that particular variety of switchgrass gets maybe 6 feet tall. The bayberry, again, it's so environmentally, if you planted it in one area where there was good soils, a little shade and moisture, it would grow significantly bigger than it's going to grow out here, maybe 5 feet. And then the red cedars can get tall. The red cedars were put in response to the ordinance requirement for trees, and it was really the only thing that we thought would look appropriate and actually survive down there that would qualify as a tree. We did take into consideration sight lines pulling in and out of the parking lot. And in addition, this stuff, the grasses die back, and if the reason you asked the question had to do with sight lines, then it would be incumbent on the owner to make sure it was like any landscape.
Well, that's the genesis of my question, is pulling out safety. In particular, the summer months, this is a heavily trafficked area. Pedestrians, bicyclists, vehicles, they're all there. And
I agree, and I think that, you'll notice down here, if we can see it better. In this area, we actually held it back like 25 feet from the edge of the opening for that reason. And then there's just the grasses. We've taken that into account in where we located the plants, the sight lines.
so a vehicle pulling out of the parking lot, whether it's on the northern, let's just use the northern area right there. So a vehicle, does that vehicle have clear line of sight to the road in just taking a simple right-hand turn?
Yes.
Okay.
When it gets up to not from the parking lot, but when it enters onto the road, yes. Yeah, none of the plants should block the views.
Okay.
Again, it's no different than any landscaping at any commercial site or even residential site. There's going to be a little bit of responsibility to somebody if something overgrows or something even seeds itself in and grows on its own to maintain those.
That was my only concern, was that northern entrance. It seems to me there was more of a change in elevation there,
It is steeper.
so.
No, it's, so, not to keep sounding like, saying the same thing, but the problem with the, these ordinance, this landscape ordinance is sort of almost like a rubric, and it's like, it's not, they don't say, hey, John, go create something that will be, enhance the beauty and environment and so forth. They tell us, okay, you got this many square feet of parking, this many parking spaces, this many linear feet of perimeter parking, and then you go to like charts, you need 3 of these, 6 of them. On sheet 2, I've actually shown all that. So it's sort of requiring that we do all this planting. You could do other plants, but I think, in my opinion, these are appropriate, and I would not be concerned about the sight lines, or I wouldn't propose them.
Okay, that was my biggest concern.
Uh,
Any other comments?
Yes,
board members?
couple of other thoughts. One is that the panicum, the switchgrass, I would encourage, in addition to the requirements in the approval, that it not be cut any lower than 8 inches in the winter, and also given the understanding and knowledge which you probably have that it can take many years for this to develop and for the beneficial soil microbial activity to become established, and that can be inhibited by high nitrogen. On your notes, you have something about not applying pesticides or herbicides or fertilizer in the rain gardens, and I would ask that that be referred to for the entire site, given the sensitive environmental nature of the area.
And if I might, that is consistent with the CRMC approval.
Great.
And while we're talking on the CRMC approval, just to update, and Mr. St. Jean can discuss this, but after our last meeting and after John had done his revised plans, we did have them looked at by CRMC. As you know, in this case, we did get the assent between master and preliminary plan. We do need now to go back for an amended assent for these landscaping changes, along with any proposed regrading. Obviously, the assent was issued without these improvements. We would anticipate that they are improvements, and certainly, coming from this board's with its experience, that they will be approved, but it is another step that we need to go through. When we do, obviously, it'll be this plan presented, along with, potential regrading, as Mr. Carter spoke about. Those plans have not been prepared yet. Pending this approval, then we'll go to CRMC for the amended assent.
Thank you.
Just as a clarification, so you spoke about the rain garden, and you have your diagram there on the lower left, and talked about the soil amendments and 8 to 12 inches deep soil. So along the revetments, you had indicated that you were going to do pocket plantings in the rocks to help attenuate the pollutants. How is that done? So you'll put soil in there, and then I'm just trying to make sure that that actually does act as a rain garden instead of just a shield for, instead of just a planting to make it look nice.
So, well, it wasn't done to make it aesthetic.
Right.
Yellow is not proposed as rain gardens.
Okay.
It's the red. If you went and looked at it, what you would see would be a boulder revetment. Some of them are above the gravel parking lot, some kind of even with it. It's just a regular boulder.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no edge, like a curve or anything, just gravel. So what we thought, because we were kind of, struggling, trying to do the grass, to look at how we could make it work. So when I refer to pocket planting, it's just a term we use that's basically individual. So wherever there's a space, and for switchgrass, it wouldn't have to be a big space, 12 inches, 18 inches. Just dig a hole, put some good soil in it, put the plant in, and let let it establish, so it wouldn't, might not be a straight line of them, but actually, it would aesthetically, I think, be kind of nice with the rocks. So it would not be proposed to be a depression or amended soil, it would just be the plants.
So the plants themselves would, as you're pointing out, would help attenuate the pollutants, but not to the extent of the rain gardens.
Yes.
Thank you.
Kayla, in looking at the items in the matrix on page 11 in particular, and this is regarding landscaping, there was installation of a landscape screen on the opposite side of Succotash Road, and I thought we resolved that.
You did. That is actually just a transition between staff. Jay was at the last meeting, I was at this one, and when we were preparing staff comments, Jay was enjoying a vacation while I was putting things together. So that is, I think, resolved with the board as the last meeting. I didn't want to insert words in here that I wasn't aware of.
All right, testing my memory, I get it.
So I have some comments. The switchgrass that's been added to the plan, in my opinion, doesn't do enough to capture and treat the sheet flow that will come across the parking lot. We have perimeter landscaping requirements in our regulations for a reason, and it's not a paved parking lot, so the way I'm reading this, it would have to be 5 feet in width. And in this location in particular, it's a very sensitive spot. On October 28th, we had a rainstorm of 2.5 inches that once again closed all of Point Judith Pond to shell fishing. And the waters immediately adjacent to this parcel are closed to shell fishing. DEM has said that the water is not suitable for having shell fishing there. It's classified as polluted. This is not a rainstorm event. It's always closed. And so in this spot in particular, it's extremely important that the water quality be protected. It's already compromised environmentally. We know that. It's in DEM's shellfish closure map right on their website. And if anything in this location, additional steps should be taken to protect the water quality and to capture the runoff and to treat the runoff. Adding some, switchgrass within some of the boulders between the parking lot and the water, to me, is not doing that. Climate change, we know, in the state of Rhode Island is going to bring more heavy rain events. The problem's not going away. And in this spot, under these circumstances, I am just not in favor of waiving the perimeter landscaping. And it's not just in these two locations. It's also at the northern end of the parcel, adjacent to the planting that's on Succotash Road. The parking spaces go right up to the revetment in the channel, and there are no plants there. And it's not just the plants. It's actual land, 5 feet that can be, excavated and improved to capture some of this runoff and have plants in there to treat it. And what I see on this plan just is not doing it. So I'm not in favor of waiving the perimeter landscaping requirements. I mean, they're asking for the interior landscaping requirements to be waived in addition to the perimeter, and that's an awful lot of landscaping waivers on a very environmentally sensitive parcel.
Ms. Noonan, you mentioned that you'd have to go back to CRMC
Correct.
for the revisions that are made at this point.
Yes.
Is that something that they would look at and address?
Well, they've already approved it as is. So our belief is that anything further, they would also improve because it would only approve because it would also further approve the quality. I mean, a couple of issues. Obviously, we're asking for the waivers, and we've discussed why we think sort of the traditional landscaping interior sort of doesn't fit for this working waterfront parcel, which is what it is, and that we are providing, over the minimum of 5% of parking for this area. So I think what John has attempted to do is just add to that, along with doing regrading. CRMC, if, in my opinion, and Rick St. Jean can talk to this a little more, if they had a problem with the runoff, they would not have approved this plan as it was. As it is, when we go back, we are going to propose further improvements on this area. I mean, in terms of this area being closed, it's primarily, I think, due to the marinas. We've looked at it, and I think Perry can talk about that a bit more. All of the marinas in the area, not just this one, too.
All marinas in Rhode Island are closed to shellfish in the adjacent waters because of boat activity.
Do you want to come up and introduce yourself and speak for the record?
Perry Rasso, the applicant. The reason why the marina and the adjacent water body is closed, and it's funny seeing a closed to shellfishing polluted sign there, is because when you see its pristine water coming in and out almost directly from the Atlantic, is because in Rhode Island, all waters within and adjacent to marinas are closed to shellfishing. It doesn't have to do with the testing, and I am aware of the shellfish closure over the summer that was due to testing, but that specific area isn't closed to shellfishing because it's polluted, and I, again, feel and know that the improvements I'm proposing would be overall net improvement to what has existed since we've all been here.
This was October 28th.
The marina closure, I understand the salt ponds were closed due to a rain event, but I'm talking about the closure within the marina.
Just so it's clear for everybody, when you talk about the different closures, whether it's from the map that the board member is showing or the one for the pond that was just discussed, does the one that you talked about for if there's closures because of rainstorms, is the water quality tested and then a determination made whether or not it's closed? Sometimes they do a preemptive closure. If there's a lot of rain, they close it, and sometimes it's because of testing. It's my understanding. It's also my understanding that the Water Quality Division at Rhode Island DEM doesn't actually, give you that information always of what was tested and where. And from what I understand, sometimes it's closed due to a testing, and sometimes it's closed because of the rain event that occurred. So what you're saying, though, is that the map that's being shown is that regardless of rainfall or not, these areas would be closed to shellfishing because of the presence of marinas. I didn't see the map specifically, but any marina and the adjacent water body is closed all year, all the time. It's never open to shellfishing because of the boat activity, and it's that's the way it is around all marinas.
So, Ms. Noonan, if I heard you correctly when you addressed Mr. Damasi's question, the changes that the board has suggested to the applicant that you have made, that we have seen through Mr. Carter's presentation, you're now going to have to go back to CRMC and show these additional changes on an approved dissent, acknowledging that it's improving a condition that already has been approved and improving the existing conditions far better than what the existing conditions showed. So
that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
So help me understand. So that's additional time on your side, your applicant's side.
Yes.
Give me a sense of timing, additional time that you're going to have to deal roughly.
Mr. St. Jean?
Hi, I'm Rick St. Jean. I'm a professional engineer in the state of Rhode Island. I prepared the plans, the civil plans for the project. That is correct. When we go to CRMC, this is going to be an amended permit, but they're going to take it basically as a new permit. So what Perry is doing is he's basically placing this lot under the care and the enforcement of the state of Rhode Island. So we're going to get a permit plan. We're going to have rain gardens here. We're going to have a stormwater maintenance plan for these stormwater structures. They're going to look at the water quality. I'm going to have to provide calculations to show the amount of runoff that I expect coming off this site. They're going to address water quality issues. And then on top of that, once they get the permit, and we know they're going to get the permit, they have the right to come down and enforce that permit, those stipulations. So it's basically out of your hands in the sense, not only did you get what you want, but you got a policing effort on top of that for, forever, basically. I did talk to Dave Reese. He's the supervising biologist at CRMC. I showed him John's plans, and he said, yes, because you're doing grading within 200-foot jurisdictional boundary, and you're doing drainage improvements or stormwater improvements, they are under CRMC's purview. So we do have to apply for a permit. He thought it was great because this is like dropped in his lap. Because otherwise they were fine with the other permit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Timing?
Huh?
Timing.
Oh, timing. Christmas time and everything, probably 6 weeks to 8 weeks by the time we actually get it in front of them and them to review it. They'll have to go through engineering, Rich Lucia, then I'll have to go through the biologist.
Okay, thank you.
Before the engineer leaves, John, I was hoping you can maybe point to a couple things for us. One of the things I would like to understand is the grading. Understand what percentage of the lot is graded such that it will go to the rain gardens, and what is the rainfall event, whether it's a 10th inch or something else, that the rain gardens are capable of. And then lastly, maybe some type of understanding on whether the proposed grading is sustainable, given it's a gravel lot, and how much maintenance would be required to sustain it, proposed grades.
The standard for water quality is 1 inch of rainfall, so it's basically the first flush. You look at a dry site that's accumulated pollutants from cars, oils, all this kind of stuff over a period that it hadn't rained, and then you get a rainstorm. That first 1 inch dislodges the stuff off the pavement, and it starts to sheet flow for maybe 80 to 100 feet. Then it starts a slow, shallow channel flow, and it goes into wherever it's headed.
So, well, 2 questions.
Yep.
What percentage of the lot is directed to the rain gardens? Is it 100% of the lot? And is the rain gardens capable of the 1/10 of an inch for 100% of the lot?
1 inch, but I don't know yet. I mean, my personal opinion is I don't think we can handle all the water. There'll be a couple of things that will happen here. When I ran some rough and dirty numbers, our total acreage of our site is 45,300 square feet. That's that 1.04 acre. That includes the piece that Perry got off DOT, right? Off-site, there's another 8,500 square feet. That's from the center line of Matuna Beach Road to the property line that Perry now controls. That's probably 50% that is paved. If you considered it all 100% impervious, right, you're looking at about, for 1 inch of water, you're looking at about 4,400 cubic feet of water. That's really not the case. If you look at maybe it's more like 60% of impervious. That's the full road, and that's the full property that's under the control of Perry, right? At 60%, you're looking at about 2,690 cubic feet of water, which is 20,120 gallons, which you subtract the rain gardens, because we already have 575 feet, and you're left with 2,115 cubic feet. To get a sense of how much water that is, if you have a 20-foot by 40-foot swimming pool in your yard, that fills the swimming pool up to 2 foot 8 inches high. So that's the amount of water you have. Is there any way to contain that water? And I mean, that's a pretty big pond. The thing that you have going or the thing everybody has going for us, is it's not paved, it's gravel. And because it's gravel, there's a lot of little ponds and depressions in the parking lot. There always will be. So as the water flows from the road, it'll get contained in the parking lot, and it'll have the opportunity to infiltrate into the parking lot. When it reaches a certain point, like before it hits the boat ramp, the reason why the boat ramp's only 4 inches high, because obviously you got to drive a trailer over the berm at the boat ramp. It'll get redirected to these rain garden areas where it'll have additional time to infiltrate. So there's a couple of ways to look at this, and of course we're going to have to work this through with CRMC. I could put a berm at a small berm or a gutter basically at the road, at the paved road at Matuna Beach Road, just before I come into the parking lot. That gets rid of 20% of the rain or the runoff that we have coming onto our site that from off-site sources. It puts the burden, and of course CRMC was going to look at the whole picture. It puts the burden on somebody else's property somewhere down the road because ultimately it's going to flow onto off-site somewhere. They may say, well, you have an opportunity to treat this, why not, attempt to treat it? So those kinds of scenarios and discussions will have to go on with the CRMC, the agency, in relation to their sections in the Red Book for stormwater.
Packed gravel has a curve number that's very similar to pavement. What I'm really trying to get at, and I've heard some statements that we're improving this site, if we were looking at runoff, just the volume of runoff, we would determine whether we're improving or not improving based on the post and how it compared to the pre. In an ideal case, I think that would be similar on the hydrocarbons going into Potter's Pond. If we're doing an environmental assessment, we would not only look at the physical changes, but we would look at the operation and the tempo of those operations. We're significantly increasing the density or the intensity of the parking. With the increase of the intensity, we're increasing the amount of hydrocarbons that is falling onto this gravel. I don't necessarily, I don't agree or disagree that we're improving the site, but my comparison for improving the site is more hydrocarbons going in before or after this intensity of the parking. So we may add some rain gardens, but if that's not fully taking the additional hydrocarbons, even though we've added rain gardens, I don't see that as an improvement because we have more hydrocarbons going in after than we did before. So what I'm really trying to get at is understanding the grading, understanding whether that's going into the rain gardens, and whether that is mitigating the additional hydrocarbons that's being created by the intensity of the lot. And if it is, then I think we're improving it. If it doesn't, then I think that we are not improving it, even though we may be doing some planting and some rain gardens. So it's not only the physical changes, but the operation and the tempo of those operations. You have to combine both of those before whether we're improving the lot or not.
The water quality volume isn't based on the number of cars you're parking. It's based on coverage. Presently, this site is nearly all, I would consider it impervious because it's all gravel.
But the hydrocarbons, the amount of hydrocarbons is going to be directly proportional to the number of cars.
But the way the regulations are is that this site would be considered a redevelopment site. I believe it would be. But a redevelopment site, generally you're required to meet 50% of the water quality volume when you're redoing a site that's existing. In this case, I believe that they may be even meeting more than that. But again, I'm not sure how to explain this, but so the other part of the regulation, and when you're dealing with a redevelopment site, is that you deal with the water quality volume that's most practicable. That's the way the regulations are. It's because they know that DEM knows, CRMC knows, and the reason why they've already received the permit on this once is that there's only so much you can do on some of these sites, and these improvements are making this site much better. Again, it's not based on the number of vehicles, and it's based on impervious coverage. Rainfall, in fact, a house, we still have to treat water off a roof, and it's because of UV exposure. So And what Rick's saying is true, in fact, that although this is considered impervious, I believe gravel is considered impervious, there are little depressions and things, and you'll see on a gravel, there's little puddles here and there. There's evapotranspiration that happens, and there's some infiltration that happens. So what I'm saying is that we're taking a site that's really bad presently, and we're improving it by putting in rain gardens. There aren't any rain gardens there now, and even the plantings that are there now aren't doing what a rain garden's going to do. We're going to be infiltrating volumes that are much greater than what's happening now. So I'm just pointing out that what's being proposed is a very good treatment for this existing site.
So can you go over the grading plan and specifically show what areas are intercepted by the rain gardens, and if there's any areas that are not intercepted, where they are located?
You can stay up there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Existing.
Yeah, that's existing. Is that what you want?
So you're looking at C2, is that right, Rick? Yeah, okay.
This is C2.
Below the boat ramp. The distance to the top of the boat ramp from the road is about 100. And as you can see, that 100 feet carries across the road running to the hatchery. And then you're probably around 220 or so. The hatchery is mostly grass. It has rain gardens. It's going to basically take care of itself. What we're going to try to do, what I hope to be able to do, is to berm off the Twin Peaks Road and let the state take care of it. I don't know if CRC is going to say that's a good thing or not, but that's what I'm going to think. All the water that's coming out that most northern driveway or entrance, we're going to get it into the corner and along that switchgrass. The plantings along the road aren't really helpful to us as far as treating stormwater because the road is pitched towards the water at that point. So I need to get it along that revetment, the top of the revetment, and try to find some kind of treatment, either ponding it, doing a small depression there to hold it for a while. The nice thing about gravel, as Richard said, it interrupts the flow for a longer period of time. You can imagine rain coming off the pavement or your roof is going to hit the gutters much quicker than rain running off of a gravelly area. So it's about 2.5 times longer it's going to stay on that gravel. The longer it stays on the gravel, the longer or the better chance you have that maybe you need 1 inch. By the time it gets off of the gravel, maybe you're dealing with half of it because half of it already went into the soil matrix. The groundwater here, based on the septic system test. Oh, I'm sorry. The groundwater here, based on the septic system test, anywhere from 24 to 48 inches down. So putting trenches in would be a really bad idea in this case. Because if you put a trench in, you're basically injecting this runoff right into the water table. You don't want to do that, especially if you're concerned about hydrocarbons. Right? You want to give it some way to bind itself up so it can get renovated by plants or by whatever, right? So working our way down the site, when you get to the boat ramp, that boat ramp is basically in line with the second entrance or the main entrance to the site. That's a direct shot, as we talked about before, when water comes off of Matuna Beach Road, it wraps around, goes right down to the boat ramp. I'd like to put a berm there, get rid of some of that stuff coming off the pavement, or make it somebody else's problem. But if they don't allow me to do that, I'm going to direct it to the bottom portion of the site so that we have an opportunity where John has placed some of these rain gardens. You're on the wrong sheet, aren't you? Okay. Yeah, like right in this area. Oh, go to your landscape sheet. So it's pretty simple grading. It's pretty flat. I mean, it's pretty steep when you first come onto the site. It's pretty flat. It ponds a little bit in the middle. I'm pretty sure if you went out there in the middle of the day and you took a 5-gallon bucket of water and you poured it on the ground over there, you'd see it go in pretty fast, even though it's compact, because it's based on the soil information for the septic system. It's fine sand to coarse sand. They never hit an impervious layer on the site. I believe there is some peat on the site lower down, but the underlying soils are not that bad. The underlying soils are good. The problem is they're good enough that you don't want to inject it too far below the surface because it'll go right into the groundwater. That wouldn't be a good thing to do. I don't know if I answered all the questions.
Thank you.
A follow-up question to Joe's. Do you feel that the capacity of this site, as shown, would be able to handle 2 back-to-back 50-year storms?
2 back-to-back 50 years? I would say yes, only because, remember, we're only treating the first flush. So if you had a back-to-back storm, the second storm doesn't have a first flush associated with it. You already got rid of all the contaminants, right? I mean, this goes back in the late 1970s. I worked for a firm in Boston, and they had a swim model back then. Camp Dresser and McKee developed it. And they found that some of the first flush off the streets was more hazardous than the sewage because, garbage trucks, brake linings, antifreeze, oil, all this kind of stuff. But the worst case was you had a dry period for a month, and all this crud accumulated on the pavement, and all of a sudden you get a flash, rainstorm, and it got it all up, and it got it right down into the storm sewer system, with no treatment, basically, because storm sewers back then were either they were combined sewers or they went right out into the bay. When they ran their test and they saw a week later, they ran the same test. Obviously, the amount of pollutants aren't on the pavement at that point. They didn't have a chance to accumulate. I don't know if that answers your question.
And so a higher volume, again, back to Joe's question, a higher volume would have a greater degree of hydrocarbon concentration?
No, not a higher volume. A longer period before a wash-off happened. So a longer period before where it just sat there and accumulated hydrocarbons, antifreeze, asbestos, everything. So on those days where summer, where it really doesn't rain for 2 months, and then you get one of these floods or these horrific rainfalls, that's the worst case.
So, Mr. St. Jean, going to my colleague, Mr. Murphy's question about the berm, which I see on the plan, and what I'm hearing you say is the direction as it hits the berm is going to come south. Correct. You talked about the northern entrance, which I agree is steep, but again, that's being funneled. Right. And I think, when I heard Rich indicate, and I appreciate your comments, they are addressing, and I will say it again, it seems like what is being proposed, you've listened to the board. I know there's some additional comments here as we debate further, potential modifications to improve, again, water quality issue. And I understand what Elise is saying, but I look at, the closure of Point Judith Pond, with all due respect to her comment, I don't see this one site solving the problem of Point Judith Pond. This is just one site. There are many other sites that contribute to the problem of Point Judith Pond, and it's not going to be solved by this site alone. So I think we have to face that reality. So I'm also considering the fact that CRMC has already blessed the stormwater management plan prior to us providing additional comment. And so I think we're getting a better plan than what we had and already approved by CRMC. So I think that's important. Staff has to, not only board has to recognize that. So I think what I'd like to do is just get an understanding from the board I'm just going to ask a simple question, and I'm going to ask each individual, do we feel that what we're seeing today, as presented by Mr. Carter, as presented by Mr. St. Jean, as, number one, listening to the board, and number two, is this an improvement over existing conditions on the site? And so, Steve, I'm going to look to you first.
Well, again, I hear Elisa's comments, and I have those concerns, but I also hear Richard's that this is an existing site that right now it's untreated. They have been to CRMC and had an approval. We are retrofitting a site. It's not a brand new use that we're going in there with a clean slate and we can plan from the get-go. So the fact that it's a retrofit, we've made, I think, significant improvements. The previous plan was approved by CMRC. They're going to have to go back to them for another approval, and I like the fact that I believe Ms. Noonan mentioned that from that point on, CRMC will be policing this site. So they'll be looking after this to make sure that what's been improved stays there and is maintained. So I think, it may not be perfect, but we started with an imperfect site and we've made improvements.
Pam, same questions?
I appreciate what has been done since the last time we met. I also recognize that this is a non-conforming site and that there's a lot of use on this site. And I just would feel a little bit more comfortable if some of those, if we could think about maybe a 5-foot perimeter along the revetment to plant the switchgrass, or alternately, again, I know that you're dealing with off-site issues, which is the state road there, but should some of those, should that perimeter right along the road be considered a rain garden if CRMC is not going to say, if CRMC is not going to let you say, oh, let's put a berm here so that that's the state's problem, maybe that is an opportunity to treat some of that water that's coming down along there in those vegetated areas, actually, that are within the right-of-way, I would imagine, but that's a bigger challenge. So I would ask if it is possible to take a 5-foot strip and put it along the revetment where the yellow is, and make that a rain garden. So I do feel, I totally agree that it's better than it was. I also am a little bit miffed by, these areas are above carrying capacity, and we are continuing to have, different, and I like the site. I like the project. I think it's a great project, but if we don't start with one site at a time, how are we going to solve some of those water quality problems? And more rain is coming. So,
thank you. Joe?
If you looked at the project specifically or limited to the physical changes, I think that there's an improvement because he's putting the rain gardens in. My understanding from the last meeting was that what CRMC was looking at was physical changes, and they were looking at the fact that it was a parking lot before and it's a parking lot after. I am not convinced that the overall site has been an improvement when you take in consideration the intensity of the use of the parking lot. So my concerns, and I do appreciate Mr. St. Jean's description of the work he's doing. However, there seem to be a lot of things that were unanswered. He said, I want to try to direct the water there. I'm not quite sure the percentage of how much water, what rainfall. I personally think that the water quality in Potter's Pond and the water quality in the salt pond is too important to leave those questions unanswered. One of the criteria that we have to evaluate is whether we are mitigating any significant environmental impact. I do not believe that we fully addressed that issue. Overall, I think it's a great project. I'd like to see Mr. Perry get it approved, but I think that we're pushing too many parking lots and we're not mitigating the impacts of that intensity. And I think that it could be, with some tweaks, it could be a very good project, but I'm not convinced at this point that we're fully mitigating the environmental impacts of the increased intensity.
So, Joe, would you agree with Pam on the 5-foot additional rain garden that's parallel to, on that yellow, that area right there that Mr. Carter's?
If the rain gardens was there and the engineer was able to give us some testimony that pretty much all the water was being intercepted with the rain garden before it went into the salt pond, and then I would agree with that.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah. So I'm not an engineer. I don't want to pretend to be one. I would assume, I think I got a green light from Rich over there. I didn't necessarily get a direct one from him, but it seemed like, what's your opinion on this? You're the town engineer. I'm going to lean on you, not...
My opinion is that the site's being made much better than existing, and I think that goes a long way. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm going to leverage that. I mean, CRMC, I'm going to leverage them to understand what's better than what I would know. So I'm pretty comfortable with it. They listened to what we had to say last time. They added more. I think I understand the runoff issue. I get the concept that you're going to have to work through with CRMC. And I think they'll be the final say.
Elise?
I think the hatchery is a great project. I am completely in favor of the hatchery. The parking intensity is very concerning to me. I think the berm going across the boat ramp is a great addition to direct water from going down the boat ramp. However, I am still not satisfied with the amount of water that's going to be captured, sheeting across, and going through those revetments and into the pond. CRMC is in control of what they give a sense to. We are in control of perimeter landscaping and whether we decide to waive it or not. And in this location, putting 5 feet of perimeter landscaping that's in the regulations between the parking spaces and the water is more important than, I would argue, just about anywhere else in town. If it's against a water body, you want to capture that water. And, you know, is this one site going to make or break Point Judith or Potter Pond? No. But what if everybody had the same attitude? Oh, well, I can have a lawn right down to Potter Pond. You know, my neighbors do too, so, what difference does it make if I put in a vegetated buffer? If everybody puts in a vegetated buffer, it makes a difference. If nobody puts in a vegetated buffer, it makes a difference. So, I don't think the attitude of, oh, well, there's issues, so my parcel doesn't matter. I don't think that's the right attitude to have here. And water quality affects everybody. It affects the aquaculturists, it affects the shellfishermen, it affects the property values. Everybody who lives and works around these ponds has skin in the game keeping this water clean. It's really important. And, CRMC has their lane that they're in. We also have a lane that we're in, and we have perimeter landscaping regulations, and I am not in favor of waiving the perimeter landscaping here. I can give up the interior landscaping. I totally get that the plants that are normally required won't work here because of where it is. Totally get that. But for this site, I am just not in favor of waiving that landscaping between the parking spots and the pond.
So Elise, based on, you heard Pam's recommendation or suggestion.
The 5 feet? Yeah.
So you're in favor of that?
Between the parking spaces. If there's water adjacent to parking spaces, I would like to see a 5-foot planting, perimetered, bed there that will not just have plants in it, but also have soil in it and material that will slow down the water, let it infiltrate, and treat it.
Pam was suggesting a rain garden. What
Right.
you're suggesting is, I think, the same, but...
Yeah, it's the
slightly
same.
different.
I'm just
Okay.
using different words.
All right.
Yeah.
You have a comment before?
I have a couple of comments, but yeah, I don't know if you want to hear them now or you want to go ahead.
Let me finish my poll. So let me give it to Maria, and then we're going to come back.
Sure.
I agree with both Pam and Elise and Joe as well. I share the same concerns. I think the question is somewhat difficult to answer in terms of improvement of the site because of the fact that it's going to be subject to intensification. So I think it's very difficult to say that, yes, it will be improved. Elise's concerns about cumulative impact are something that should be very important to this board. And anything that we could do to mitigate the situation is something that we should enforce.
Thank you. So, Councilor, you
Sure.
wanted to address two questions or
A couple of comments to make to start with, and I think John and Perry Rasso just discussed. They can do the 5-foot perimeter in those yellow areas, okay? That can be done. I don't think anyone disagrees on the water quality. I hope you didn't take that to mean any of this. Perry makes his living off of shellfish, and this hatchery is going to improve water quality. There's no desire to do it. The only thing, and I want to say this generally, is we're dealing with, and I think, John talked about this initially, we're dealing with parking lot restrictions and guidelines, if you look at your manual, at the regulations, that are your traditional parking lots. I stopped at CVS on the way here and actually looked at all the plantings and did that sort of thing. This is a little different. You're on the water, you've got the revetments. If everyone's okay with not doing the interior landscaping, and the only person I heard mention it was Elise, and you said you were fine with it, if it's in terms of the perimeter, if we put in the 5 feet in the yellow, that we can do that, it'll be done. In terms of the engineering, and Mr. Murphy, I hear those from you, and I thank you for your comments. This is the problem with CRMC and these boards, is that now we're kind of getting in a pickle back and forth. Rick didn't develop grading and all that because we didn't even know if you would like these plans, and so that wasn't done. It will need to be done for CRMC. You have currently a stormwater management plan that was submitted early on in our preliminary plan application. That's going to have to be, I assume, revised and updated, not only for CRMC, but it will be presented to you. And additionally, in your conditions of approval, item 7 specifically talks about securing the soil erosion, runoff, and sedimentation control permit. So we've got a couple different things, first of all, runoff, and then the water quality. Landscaping, in this case, can help the water quality. I don't know if that's the purpose of the landscaping as it's put into your ordinance. But here, like I said, if on a redevelopment parcel, if we can add in those 5-foot wide boundaries in the area where the yellow is, if you're okay with all the other improvements, what I would ask, and we can keep you apprised and submit plans to you, or if you want us to come back for final, to this board, but it's difficult for us to get bounced back and forth between you and CRMC. So at some point we got a fisher cut bait. Sorry for the fish analogy, but this, so that's what we're looking for. So we'll do the 5 foot. Obviously, this lot, I think it's pointed out, is now going to be under CRMC control and jurisdiction, and as I make part of my living off of notices of violation, I can tell you they do enforce. And it is different than some other properties if you're bringing a lawn down to the water. You may put in vegetation, not that you have to on a lawn, but you're also throwing chemicals onto that. That's not happening in this case. So I think there is a lot that mitigates in favor of this proposal. We will add in those perimeter plantings. And I would just ask on the engineering side, we could keep you abreast, we can send the stuff to you, but we really ultimately have to have the approval for CRMC. That's just the pickle I feel like we're in.
Of that being long and thin, that it accepting the water before it goes. So I wasn't necessarily looking for calculations, more of just the area of the parking lot being directed towards that 5-foot perimeter.
And just to be clear, I think Rick has also said, I don't think he can guarantee 100% capture, but on a redevelopment parcel above the 50% and obviously for as high as possible. And I think CRMC, once they look at the fact that we're doing the gradings and things, they'll obviously want the highest number possible on that also.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Ms. Noonan. I appreciate that. Kayla, with that being said, and I think what I'm hearing from the board is, and what I'm hearing from the applicant is they're willing to do the 5-foot landscaping as we just described and what Mr. Carter was pointing to on the plan. And so we're gonna come back to another meeting, and this goes through December 30th. So I know we have one meeting basically that we could take this on in December and finalize it. And I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything on that one. If there's other, I know we have some other dates that are being planned for other reasons.
I think you're right on as far as timeline. I'm going to throw another consideration out there for the board. And that consideration would be, if we're at a point where there's resolution in sight, we could do a condition of approval for it, and you can actually also request that final plan approval not be done administratively in the department, but come back to you also. You have an opportunity to see that and make sure it's sort of meeting the intention of what you have. That way they can move forward with CRMC without losing the next few weeks, keep going forward in the spirit of cooperation that seems to be going back and forth here, and make sure that you all get the final look at that instead of having an administrative sign-off. So I'd suggest that as another alternative way to move forward.
That's a valid point. Ms. Noonan, you comfortable?
Assuming we get the waivers, yeah.
I'm just saying to meet the time frame. You understand CRMC as well, so.
Absolutely. And again, with Kayla, if you want to fine-tune any of these conditions, but currently I think number 8 talks about the landscape plan submitted as part of the final plan, talks about substitutions. 9 talks about the landscape material guarantee. 10 talks about completeness from the architect. I think any of these conditions going forward, that can include a 5-foot buffer in the yellow areas, and then if we could get the approvals on the waivers and preliminary plan this evening, then we can go forward to CRMC, maybe add another condition that we come back to you for final instead of having it done administratively, which is, I never asked for that, but in this case I will.
So I guess, and we all have one common about the project. We like the project. We like the fact that Perry is taking this on and is going to be able to create spat instead of buying it from the state of Maine and selling it locally as well, which is an important part of what he's doing and why he's doing what he's doing. And also recognize that, he worked with the University of Rhode Island on this project. They contributed. Also, he received an innovation voucher from the state of Rhode Island in the tune of $50,000 to move this project forward. So he's done a lot of his homework, and I want to thank him for that. So that seems to be the common denominator. We like the project, number one. So based on Kayla's suggestion, if we're comfortable.
Can I just clarify?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe. Steve.
We're going to make an approval, affirmative approval tonight, and just let staff oversee the feedback from CRMC, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So
which incorporates the 5-foot of plantings on the the rain garden on the
I'm going to say that a little differently, because I think I think what I'm hearing here is
I'm
Steve
looking for approval.
pointing towards approval with staff oversight, and I think what's on the table is approval with final plan approval, that final sign-off coming to you all as an entity, as opposed to for a staff sign-off.
Okay.
Has this been closed to public comment?
Before you move on those,
We haven't had comments, so I'm just trying to get that out.
can I just clarify if you're going to go this either way on review, but if it's going to get approved tonight, can I submit a hard copy of this plan? It highlights the yellow areas that we're talking about, and can we be clear, and this was at the request of Mr. Carter here, so we all know, 5-foot vegetated rain garden in those areas, in the yellow areas on this plan, which is the color-coded L1.
I would say yes, and what I think I'll suggest for the board to do is let's just make this very perfectly clear, add an additional condition of approval that a 5-foot landscape bed serving as a rain garden will be installed in that yellow area being discussed. Just so I am clear and that gets written up properly, we're talking about the northern yellow area? Both yellow areas?
Both.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure. So in the yellow areas, so I'd say that would be a condition of approval you would want to attach. You could also attach a condition of approval for revising the CRMC permit, but that's sort of necessary per the framework we're in anyway. But I think a condition of approval, just putting that explicitly as depicted on this plan, will get us there.
Great, perfect.
So this is a public hearing, and I do want to open this up to members of the public. If you have any comment, please come up to the podium, state your name, your address, and your comment, please. Okay.
To close the public hearing.
We have a motion from Steve. Second. We have a second from Joe to close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. We have a suggestion and a good recommendation from Kayla, who I think summarized the suggested motion that we make an approval. This would come back to us at final approval, so it's the board. And if people understand that and are willing to proceed down that path, like to see who would like to make the motion.
I have a.
Need some. You have some.
Oh, you have some too.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Findings of fact number 7 says Fairgrounds Road. Should be Succotash.
Say that again? I'm sorry. I missed
Findings of fact number 7 says Fairgrounds Road. Little cut and paste.
Good catch. Any others? You're pretty good at this.
I would suggest to add under conditions, probably the most logical place is item number 8, and I would say that no application of fungicides, pesticides, herbicides, or fertilizer, no pruning less than 8 inches of the switchgrass in the winter if pruned.
Anybody have any comment on that with Maria's suggestion?
I think it had the no fertilization on the landscape plan already, didn't it?
Only in the rain gardens, and I'm talking about on the site as a whole. And it didn't have all of those.
And that seems to be an agreement from CRMC, so we're sort of just acknowledging something that will be enforced on the property.
All right, thanks. Any other comments, suggestions, either to the findings of fact or any other comment? So we had a motion from Steve, and I don't think we had a second with the changes as made.
So,
Second from Pam. Any further discussion? And we have Kayla with further discussion. Go ahead.
okay, so I would just so we're clear, I think the way to do this is to do 2 additional conditions of approval. One, describing the landscape plan, how we just discussed it. A second being final plan approval will be done by the planning board, just so that we don't lose track of that.
Claire. Okay, I like that. Steve, as amended?
As amended.
Pam? Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wait a minute. Kayla, we have to read the motion first, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you for keeping me honest.
Steve, go ahead, all yours.
South Kingston Planning Board hereby grants preliminary plan approval to MTK ESM LLC Major Land Subdivision Project, a proposed 3,600 square foot shellfish hatchery and principal parking use located at Assessors Plat 87-2, Lot 4, with a physical address of 650 Succotash Road. Approval is based upon plan set entitled Proposed Shellfish Hatchery Operation, 650 Succotash Road, Sheets 1, C1 through C5, and L1 through L2, dated September 27, 2018, with revisions through November 8, 2019. Prepared by St. Jean Engineering, LLC, Structural Marine Engineers, East Greenwich, Rhode Island, John C. Carter and Company Landscape Architects, Narragansett, Rhode Island, National Land Surveyors Incorporated, Surveyors Woonsocket, Rhode Island. This approval is based on the following findings of fact and conditions of approval. Findings of fact 1 through 12 is amended tonight, and conditions of approval 1 through 13 as amended tonight.
All right, we have a motion from Steve, a revised motion from Steve, an official motion from Steve, and do we still have an official second from Pam? Second. Okay, let's have another vote. Any further discussion first? No further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. All right, the next agenda item is the preliminary, well, let's go back. It's the combined conceptual master plan and public informational meeting, preliminary plan public hearing, major land development project, South Kingstown Land Trust barn.
And just a minor correction on the staff comments, it says Ocean Haven subdivision under project name, and obviously needs to be changed.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Martha Day. I'm an attorney with office at 71 Main Street in Wakefield, and I also have the honor of being a member of the Board of Directors of the South Kingstown Land Trust. So tonight, we're talking about the property that's at 17 Matunic Beach Road, the corner of Route 1 and Matunic Beach Road, where we presently have one building that serves as our headquarters for meetings and a field office. And we are looking to take that 3.6 acre parcel and add 2 additional buildings. So at this point, we have no waivers of the subdivision or land development regulations being requested, and the plan is in compliance with all the standards and provisions of the zoning ordinance, which I hope we'll show with the plans tonight. Just as an aside, we did post our notice, our orange sign for the hearing a couple weeks ago, and we had a lot of calls from people wondering how many houses we were going to be putting on the field at Wheaton Farm. So we did move that sign back up to closer to the corner where it maybe wasn't quite as visible, but just to make it clear that we're talking about the corner parcel and having nothing that is a change to the 98-acre Whedon Farm fields, the farmland. So the proposed uses that we have here are permitted in R200 zone under the Use Code 27 of service organization, which has philanthropic and charitable institution and miscellaneous services attached. So I'd like to start off with having Julia Landstreet, our executive director, present the plans and explain a little bit about what the present uses are and the proposed uses of the property from the land trust point of view. Kayla, should we use the...
Yeah, you're welcome to use the computer. So the files you'll see open there are your site plan, the images of the rendering, and the landscape we talked about. So make yourselves at home on that.
It'd be more fun if somebody else opened that up. How about it? With like tech skills. I'm Julia Landstreet. I'm the executive director for the South Kingstown Land Trust. And I also, in addition to the site plan, I also brought you copies of the collateral materials that we did for the capital campaign that's going to fund this project. And the visuals are great, so I'm going to hand them out real quick. Most of y'all may recall from when we were here many moons ago, I think it's been about almost 2 years now, at least a year and a half, when we started the project, that our goal is to add 2 small structures to the property, one to function as a tractor barn and the other to function as a welcome center and office building. The way the application read, it said that we were converting the original structure from residential to offices, and nothing is actually changing in that structure other than the nomenclature under which it was originally passed. They called it residential, but it was never developed out that way or used that way, so we're really not doing anything to that structure at all. If we look at this aerial view, the structure that's in the center will be the office building. It's going to be about 1,300 square feet. It will have 4 offices across the front, 1 large one at the east end, and then a handicap accessible bathroom, a copy area, and a place for our bookkeeping records across the back. And then the tractor shed is the structure next to it. And if you look at it, the southernmost bay, that bay will be insulated so that we can work on it in the winter. And then the other 3 bays will not be insulated. The project started before the Land Trust hired me. They had been working on it for about 2.5 or 3 years to try and come up with a housing for our farm equipment and maintenance equipment. And they'd looked at a variety of locations around the barn, sort of every actually possible other option. And then we ended up coming up with this one. At the moment, all of our tractors and equipment are in various barns and sheds in and around Whedon Farm and in and around the staff members. So to put everything in one place was where this project started. And then after I was with the organization for a while, I realized that we had functioned historically, I think the unfortunate but not inaccurate term is in silos, and nothing that happened with land protection then also corresponded with land management, which had nothing to do with our development functions. And it was all very disjointed. And with having half the staff in Robinson Street and a portion of the staff down here or out in the field, we lose all those synergies. I'm the only full-time person on staff. Everyone else is part-time, between 10 and 30 hours. And so the goal of having everybody in one location so that we have any chance of seeing each other is terrific. And then the other reason why we've ended up aiming for a small structure, the 1,300 square feet, is that as much as there's opportunity for growth in our organization, I can't see it ever being that we will have more people. We will just probably add hours to the positions that are in place. So we don't really need that much more footprint. The other piece is that we have the barn, and I don't know if you all have had the ability to be there or not, but there's one large room downstairs, and then two, there's a boardroom and a meeting room upstairs, and then two small office spaces. And then we have the world's biggest dry basement possible. And so there's no need for us to build any sort of extraneous meeting or storage space because we already own that. In terms of how we see the functions scaling up for increased traffic or that kind of stuff on site, obviously there will be some increase, but I doubt it will be that dramatic. Luckily, for the gift of the barn, it was built by a philanthropist and then gifted to the organization. It came with the good news and bad of we may only use it for non-profits, for non-fundraising events. And so the bad news is, from a revenue standpoint, I'm not in the wedding business, and the really great news from a sanity standpoint is that we're not in the wedding business. We can't. It's really a bummer. So, but we do often use it for community groups. The Supreme Court uses it for their retreats. The school systems will use it, et cetera, and have gatherings. And they tend to be, I would say, between 12 and 20 people is the norm for the building uses. And then we do it for meetings and functions and education and outreach. And those tend to be once a month, maybe twice a month in the summer when we're trying to tap into a different demographic. The other piece about being, having it be on site is that Whedon Farm really encapsulates all of the services and opportunities that we have been able to coalesce and provide back to the community in both land protection and then education and outreach and community engagement. And so luckily everybody else in the community has been here for forever, and so you recall that the farm was originally from the north side of Wash Pond all the way to the ocean. And so at this point, the Land Trust protects from the Hale House, which is just on the north side of Route 1, the south side of Wash Pond, all the way to Matunic Beach Road. And so it gives us, to be there gives us the opportunity to really talk about the community from a historical perspective and use this rather elaborate microcosm to then talk about the rest of the community of South Kingstown and reference the different properties that we have around. And so to have everything in one place will be just a great opportunity. And then the other piece, if you've ever been to our space in Robinson Farm, Robinson Street is super. What it loses in style points, it certainly gains in location. But the problem is that when somebody is sitting there, it's really hard to explain to them what land protection is and why it matters to you if you don't live right next to it. And so to be on site will just make a huge difference for us for education and outreach. And so, that being said, I'd like to introduce Patrick, who will talk about the rest of the plans.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Julia, as far as the present uses of the property for parking and traffic, what do you tend to, what's your experience at this point in time?
I would say present uses, the norm is there are 1 or 2 staff cars and 3 or 4 dog walkers or bird watchers.
So that's your average visitors, and by adding additional offices there, you anticipate the need for parking is at this time covered how on that plan?
Oh, so there will be an additional,
that's probably not the
on a daily basis, there'll probably be another 2 to 3 staff people. As I said, all the staff is part-time except for me. There'll be 10, they're 10 to 20, Angie's 30 hours. So I'd say there'll be, 2 people there one person there 5 days a week, 2 people there 4 days a week. And then everybody else drops in and drops out
And
the rest of the week.
And right now, the parking is
Right now, the parking is that gravel permeable surface you can see to the lower left. There will be some increased parking back down in front of the tractor shed at the base. If you'll see it, you'll come in off of Matunic Beach Road. We're going to have cars to continue to enter where they've been coming in just for sightline purposes and safety, and then come in and turn off and go down to the parking area there. That will mostly be a turnaround for the tractors, but people being people, my suspicion is the land operations staff will park down there next to where the equipment is some of the time. So those 2 vehicles, which are now parking on site, will be down there.
And then the other question is just given the neighborhood, this plan designed as includes an outbuilding for farm equipment, and the office building being as reduced, 1,300 square foot. As far as how do you feel that fits with the neighborhood?
So in terms of the aesthetics and design for the building, we have modeled them not directly but referentially off the other structures in Whedon Farm. So the exterior will be cedar shake shingles. The roofing will be the same asphalt as is on the barn. They're both very sort of low profile with that kind of brick red trim that the rest of the historic structures have on it, that the Whedon Farm structures have. And then the goal is to have it look as much like it's always been there as possible, is really in terms of aesthetics. We've gone very sort of low-slung and reverential. I've met with all of the abutters, and I know Mr. Smith sent you all a letter. Mr. Coolidge phoned me. He said he wasn't sure if he was going to write you a letter or not, but he's in support of it. And then, it's not Merrick. Yeah, the Merricks. They've also contacted me, and they're in favor of it. And the Getches are also in favor, and the Catellis are.
So even though this plan shows white buildings, you could just explain where this view is from?
So this is standing at the north end of the first field at Whedon, looking back towards the structure.
Towards Route 1.
Towards Route 1, looking north.
Okay.
Is that good?
I think so. Next, I have asked you to accept as an expert witness Patrick Freeman from American Engineering, and if you'd like Patrick to list his qualifications.
Hello, my name is Patrick Freeman. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Rhode Island, as well as a Class 3 outs designer. I've been working for American Engineering for the last 5 years, working on numerous residential projects, commercial developments, subdivisions, and condominium units.
Okay. Is that mic on? I'm having a hard time hearing him.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you try again?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Now we
that's
can hear
better.
you. Okay.
Patrick, I think the secret is that when it's pointed down like that, it's actually that. Yeah, there you go.
Perfect.
Do you want him to do that again?
No, continue.
I also appeared before the planning and zoning boards in the towns of Jamestown, North Kingstown, Exeter, and North Smithfield.
So, Patrick, your firm, American Engineering, has prepared our present our site plan and as well as the proposed plan. And if I could just ask you to go ahead and walk us through that.
We were hired to modify the septic system as well as provide grading and drainage design for the project, as well as connect to the existing utilities. For the septic system, we modified the existing system and abandoned the existing septic tank and proposed a advanced treatment Septitech system. As for the drainage design, there's an existing depression in the easterly portion of the lot that collects all the stormwater in the development area for both the existing and proposed conditions. This area, we modeled it in HydroCAD, and the water does not flow out of it during the 10-year storm for both the existing and proposed conditions. As far as the utilities, there's an existing water line that runs from Matunic Beach Road up to the existing 4-bedroom dwelling. We will connect the proposed office building to this existing dwelling. The only condition was we had to add a meter pit by Matunic Beach Road. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So I guess, I think it was Ms. Freeman, you may have answered my question, because when I was looking at your septic system application, I saw 33 employees, and I went, yikes, a lot of people. No, I realize. And so my first, comment was like, wow, are they going to sublease space if they're going to have that many if they're siting? But I realize going from residential, which has about 115 per bedroom per gallons per day, versus individuals under this use, I get it. So I'm good.
I think, can you blow that up a little bit, Patrick? I think enlarge that. So as far as the driveway and parking composition, that was a question which we discussed. And I believe that, as far as the surfaces go there's a lot of green grass on that area that we also use for overflow parking. But the new driveway, what will that be? What will that consist of?
That's a 4-inch crushed stone driveway.
Okay. And the size of that parking lot in front of the tractor shed is scaled for a particular reason?
So we oversized that parking area because in order to back implements with the tractor into that garage, they would need more space in order to make that turn and then back something into that shed.
Okay.
And the number of spaces in that particular area?
We didn't specify spaces. I wasn't sure that we intended to have specified parking areas. I can give you a rough number if you'd like as to how many cars you would be able to fit along there, but in order to back something in with a trailer, it may be difficult with cars parked there. So I'm not sure what your intent.
So I'm hearing from Ms. Day that that's going to be parking for, in some cases, parking, and I'm hearing from you, Mr. Freeman, that you didn't specify parking. So I think it's important that we understand where parking is going to be. I understand when you come in the main road and you have the circular drive, but I think we need more definition here.
I can add parking to that point.
I don't think that was our intention because we need the turnaround area. I was just pointing out that area is large because of you've got tractors and trailers that you're using, and it's not intended as parking unless the staff leaves a pickup truck there while they take a tractor out or something like that. It's not meant for parking for the land trust at all. We would use the area to the south of the stone walls where the present parking lot is for the staff parking. And there's adequate capacity there, right?
Yes, there is.
Okay. And then as far as
I want to say to Mike Sherry
Michael
with
Sherry.
the Land Trust, there's a lot of trailers we have, landscape trailers. There'll be several of those that go in and out, towed by vehicles. So there's going to be transient traffic like that. There is no intention to leave cars parked there during the day or at any time. It's always transit. Also, we enlarged it enough for the fire trucks to be able to go in there and do a turnaround if they needed to.
And do you feel that this design, given that we didn't have any stormwater and drainage built into this, necessary for this, that the design has no significant negative environmental impacts on the property?
Doesn't.
Okay, thank you. Next, if you could find the slide that has the landscaping on it. Try the bottom one. Nope.
This only has our 4 plans.
Okay. Part of your package, I believe, we gave you a landscape plan, and I have Rich Clark here tonight. Call Rich. Thank you very much.
I think I can narrate through the plan without being able to see it if you need. But the objective of the landscape plan here was to be minimalistic and to preserve as much of the existing vegetation as possible, and to then be aware of sight lines from neighbors, of which there really are none, and sight lines from Matunic Beach Road, of which there are some, particularly when you're headed northbound. So the picture with the overlay of the buildings itself doesn't really convey what it's going to look like after construction, because we propose to add some trees on the south side of the building, so that looking from Matunic Beach Road, your view to the buildings would be obscured. And most of the proposed plants that we have are probably going to be relocated from elsewhere on the farm. Juniperus virginiana, which there's a slide of in there somewhere, is native. Eastern red cedar is growing wild all through the property, and we have the ability to relocate some from less desirable places to add screening to the front of the building to minimize those views. Can you?
And you, as far as the invasives that are present?
So yeah, the only material that we really want to remove, I think there are a couple trees that are marked on the plan that need to be removed for the construction itself. The only other vegetation that we intend to alter really is to remove invasive species from the border of the periphery of Matunic Beach Road and Route 1. We'd like to get the bittersweet and plants like that out of the existing vegetation, but other than that, we intend to preserve all the vegetation that's there in order to limit the views from the highway and the road. And there is also a pretty significant grade change, particularly on the highway side, that would also obscure the view into the property. So there's existing wild rhododendron and American hollies and significant amount of evergreen and deciduous plant material that's going to screen it adequately on the north and east sides. Cover all of it?
So that's it as far as, we have a few other folks here. Paul Sherman and Mike Sherry are both leading the building committee in case you have questions about the plans, and I think those were also included in our packet, but I'm not sure if you got the front view of the tractor shed. I looked for it tonight in the packet, and I wasn't sure if it had been submitted to you, but we have copies of that in case anybody would like to see that as well. So that's all for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Day.
I'd like to make a comment on the project overall.
Come on up and state your name, please.
Mike Sherry, 92 Bayfield Drive, Wakeford, Rhode Island. I've been on the board for about 20 years, president for about 11 years, and I've been involved with the acquisition of the Hale House back into the farm. Just wanted to give you a sense of what we were trying to do in the Matunic sense of place we have as an organization. Our goal was to take these two new buildings, tie them in to the existing structure and into the other structures on the farm that are currently owned by the Smith family. We also give a nod to the Hale House and tying it all back together to the days prior to Route 1 being there, so that you can see the influence of the farm, the Whedon farm, the Smith family, as it relates to that whole area. So our goal was to unify it as a campus-type arrangement. And Jack Renshaw is a historic architect that worked for us on the Hale House Annex, also did these buildings. And when you are actually there, when you look at all the buildings, you feel them tying together to give a sense of place for Matunic. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, so if anybody has comment, please come up to the podium, state your name and your address. Any comment from board members?
Just that it's noteworthy that they are going to be dealing with the invasives. That's an important topic and one that all applicants should be aware of.
So, yes, ma'am.
Roberta Mulholland from Matunic Schoolhouse Road in Matunic. I had some concerns about the intensification of any buildings on this piece of property. The Land Trust mission is, and our tax dollars have gone to the Land Trust to keep open space. People can barely build a house in the country of South Kingstown anymore. So this kind of intensification for an office doesn't seem appropriate for Matunic. Now, I understand that it's a service organization, but it also rents out the barn. Whether or not it rents it out for nonprofits is a question I have. For many years, a dance group used that as their home. They have apparently recently moved, but this is a commercial use. This building does get used for commercial purposes. They're basically collecting rents. They rent some of their other property. They rent some of their fields. So the question is, why would they intensify use in Matunic? It's all open. And as we're coming out of Matunic, going north, we're going to see what was just put up there. We don't need a little office park down there. It's R200 zoning. The traffic, one car every so often, there are more than one car there. Coming out of that driveway, if you're coming up Matunic Beach Road slowly, those cars coming out present a hazard. Exactly what are we doing? Do we have a traffic study there? Are they going to rent the offices? What is going to be in your conditions that limit them, if you approve this, to not renting those offices out? Not competing with other taxpayers in this town, renting out commercial property. It's a concern I've had for many years. Usually falls on deaf ears, but I'm hoping that you will take that into consideration. I do think that Richard's plan, which is apparently not put up there, to block those buildings from view as we're coming down toward the highway, is going to make a big difference, and I think that should absolutely be required. I don't think we should see any of those buildings if you allow that. And I do think you need to consider that we have spent a lot of money in this town, all the citizens' money, to give to the Land Trust to keep development from Matunic and other parts of this town, especially along the south coast of the town, and really consider whether this is an appropriate place for an office building. It might be an appropriate place for a barn, but does it have to be a 20-foot high barn? Do we have to see the barn? So I hope that you're going to consider that. I know the Land Trust pretty much, is beloved by their members. I don't know if you were members, but we do have a concern about the Land Trust continuing to kind of go over and over. 2,800 acres now they own. That's a big piece of property down there. They've had an office in town for years. It is not difficult to take people out to any of their 2,800 acres to show them what open space is. So I hope you would consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Any comments from the board?
Just like to hear confirmation from Caleb that this is a permitted use within the zoning district.
Yeah, so service organizations are permitted use in the district. To one of the comments said by Ms. Mulholland, the idea of ensuring that the space doesn't become used or subleased out as additional office space, I think, is something for the board to consider, and certainly can fall in place there. I'm going to refer to the draft motion, not because that's sort of where we are right now in this moment, but as just a reference point of what we're sort of requiring along the way. Right now, there's a finding of fact that the service organization is a permitted use. you all may want to consider putting something in there saying that no leasing of office space is permitted to anything other than a service organization, so that you don't end up with a scenario where the evolution of use over time leads you somewhere different in that space.
Thank you.
I can confirm that they can't rent out the barn because I tried to rent it out. So I'm pretty sure they can't do it.
Yeah, I wanted some clarification on that. Was it just the, was it the land, or the structures on the land that couldn't be rented out, or was it just that particular structure?
So the land that the building is on is a separate parcel. So the barn cannot be rented out sort of at a full commercial rate. The farmland to the south, we do lease that out. We have a number of different tenants and a number of different management practices there.
Okay, so where the proposed buildings are going, are there any restrictions on the use of that building that you're going to build there, based on whoever gave the land or gifted that land?
Because there are no restrictions on the 3.96 acres that would automatically apply to the building, but we will fully utilize the structure. We have no plans to be leasing out our office space.
You wouldn't have a problem with that being a condition of approval, no subleasing of office space?
The only reason I would, thinking about it as Ms. Mulholland was speaking, the only place I could see where it could back us into a place we wish we didn't have to get to is that the state of Rhode Island, for better or worse, has 45 land trusts, although we only have 39 towns. And so there has been conversations of the land trusts kind of pooling efforts and energies. And as we are the largest in the state, and so we've been approached by some of the smaller ones to try and work with us. And so the only reason I could see that I would wish you hadn't done that if you chose to do that is if we were approached by, like now River Land Trust or Charlestown or one of the other abutting land trusts, and trying to become more cohesive and share functions to be more efficient. I could see that as a potential scenario, not a likely scenario because we're still in Rhode Island, but a potential scenario where we would try and collaborate more formally with another, partner organization.
But they would be considered a service organization, so you wouldn't have concern with a condition of approval of not leasing it out to other than a service organization.
Yeah, correct, absolutely. And in some ways, I think it would be probably not dissimilar to the restriction of not becoming a wedding venue. It's wonderful. So.
And don't go away. The definition of the service organization includes other miscellaneous services. And so I think in the past, too, we've had conversations with that maybe satellite offices of soil conservation people or, things like that. They're not part of the land trusts that are...
Right, the Southern Rhode Island Conservation District and other, sort of related entities. And
they come down here and they don't have a place, and it's great if they have a place to put their computer or,
right.
stop in and take it to, so we do have services that overlap that, we're in tandem with.
Are they government? Does the service organization stipulate non-government?
Well, this one says, and other miscellaneous services.
Okay.
So
I'm just wondering what the interpretation, Soil Conservation Service is part of the government, although the Southern District, I don't know.
I think that's a 501c3.
Yeah, okay. So just to clarify that.
Yeah, and I think my clarification is going to be more of a guidance than a clarification on it, because it's actually not really my clarification to make. So a term defined in the zoning ordinance is for the zoning enforcement officer to decide what falls within it. And so were there a condition limiting you to service organizations, I would say you may look to have a conversation with Wayne Pimentel, our zoning enforcement officer, ahead of time to see if an entity you would be looking, who might want to cohabitate with you falls within that category. Mm-hmm.
Any other comments? Ms. Collins?
Roberta Mulholland. It's okay. Because this sounds super loud right here. The question about my concern with allowing a non-tax-paying property holder to turn their offices into income-producing is we have other taxpayers in this town who could provide a place for the Supreme Court to meet. The Supreme Court has met all around Washington County. I don't know if they charge them or not. A dance group, that's not a service organization. They were there for years, once a month. There was a lot of cars there, once a month, sometimes twice. The last 990 shows they had $15,130 in income from their field office, which is the barn right now. So, and Ms. Riccitelli, who also works for the Land Trust, has testified to the town council that they do in fact rent that barn. So when we're doing this with a non-tax-paying entity, and this group is specifically exempted in our town charter, it was amended to do that, why are we providing competition for our tax-paying property owners who also have the ability to rent offices on a short-term basis, meeting rooms? Why wouldn't we just say, it's yours, you can use it, but you can't rent it out to other people? You're taking money right out of the pockets of businesses and property owners in South Kingstown and putting it into this organization that isn't paying taxes. So that's a concern I have. It's a direct competition. And while they may pay some taxes on the barn, I think there's a payment in lieu of tax agreement in effect. They certainly don't pay full taxes. And that will be, I guess, something for the tax assessor and the town council to deal with. That's not your thing. But again, I think you could put those conditions on it and not make it a satellite office for all sorts of organizations who could be supporting our taxpayers. Thank you.
Before you leave the podium, and I understand and I respect your comments, I think we all do. However, Kayla, made a very interesting comment, which is basically reading the current zoning, which is R200, correct, residential 200, but there is a provision in the zoning ordinance that allows for nonprofit, as I think the term was, service organizations like this, which is the allowed use that's allowing the applicant to come forward. So that's currently in our regulations.
So they can come forward.
They can come forward. They can also take it, they can use the land for an office. I had the same question, believe me, R200, and I'm saying I understand what R200 is trying to do. But in our regulations, the land trust, as a service organization, a nonprofit, has the right to the office-based proposal that they're bringing forward. So I just wanted to make sure you understood the regulation allows it.
And do they have the right to rent it?
I understand what you're saying about, private sector opportunities that are outside of this and that other groups. So I think that's the question we're having, is the understanding of what is a non-service organization. And I think Kayla suggested Wayne Pimentel as the building official, the zoning official, can rule on that. But I think what we're hearing is again, other non-service or service organizations, nonprofits like a land trust, et cetera, would be allowed. I think it's a question of, you're right, intensity. And that's something I just want to noodle a little bit more with and seek comment from my fellow board members as well.
Thanks very much.
So thank you.
Thank you.
So before you go on, any further thoughts on we're having this discussion about, renting. I understand Ms. Landstreet has indicated that they do below market rent. That's what I heard her say. You do take rent, but I heard you say below, I'm summarizing as below market rent. So is there any other discussion on that particular item and whether it's through the zoning ordinance that would have to define it further or not allow it at all? Anybody have any thoughts on this?
I do. I'm just, I'd like some clarification that this project coming forth is for the office and the bar and the garage. Are we supposed to even be thinking about what the existing use is and what the zoning allows or doesn't allow for that?
Yeah, Pam, I turned on my microphone to speak to that point, actually, exactly. So right now, the proposal before you all is for the additional office space building and the barn, the storage barn. The existing use on the property is not what's being contemplated tonight, only the proposed development here. And so I believe Ms. Mulholland's concerns about the use of the existing space there are not directly tied to the application before you all, valid as they may be. I don't think they're part of the development proposal before you all.
So is that something that the zoning official would then address?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So, Kayla, let me take it one step further. Does this have to go in front of the zoning board?
There's no special use permit.
No. I mean, really, functionally, what you have there is an existing use, right? And you have a proposal for an expansion for office use and the barn building. So those uses for office space for a service organization and an ancillary building for their equipment are allowed uses per the zoning ordinance under service organization. The existing use there, and whether that's what that status of that use is a question for zoning, but it's not necessarily pertinent to what's under sort of review today.
So let me just go back to a comment that was made about parking. There's a little bit of discrepancy what I was hearing between what Ms. Landstreet was stating and what Mr. Freeman was stating. I think if I were a total stranger coming in onto the property, I would need to be directed where to park, and I would have to understand that. So first and foremost, we require in site plan review, we like to see parking. Where's the parking going to take place? And more than just in that area, and an additional parking is by the barn, it has to be further defined. I think that needs to be done on this plan because I'm not seeing it. And again, I'm trying to be proactive from a total stranger approaching your property. Where do I go? Lack of signage, what I'm seeing, and also lack of designated parking. So I think that's something that the plan has to work on. It should be incorporated in the plan.
Question. So are you asking that we stripe the dirt? I don't understand.
I'm just asking Mr. Freeman to be creative. He's an engineer. And, that's why you hired him. And to designate the parking so a total stranger coming onto the property would know where to go and park his or her vehicle.
So, John, are you asking two things? One is to designate it on the plan.
Correct.
And then second, to put some signage on the property to say, park here.
I'm suggesting signage would help. How that's defined, that's for the engineer to determine.
What is their parking
ratio?
So there will be signage indicating...
So, hang on.
If it's a residential use with the option for a nonprofit, do they actually have any parking requirements?
Yeah, so Steve, it's in a residential zone, but the use itself will have parking requirements with it. And were I not having internet difficulties here, I could tell you what they were. But so in short, they will have parking requirements. They'll be based on functionally on office use, I imagine, but I'll take a look at that. I imagine their engineer will too. I think what John is requesting is that the engineer sort of look at that.
Correct.
Look at where the parking is going to be put on the site, We've seen people approach this creatively before, right? Like whether or not you need to delineate a parking space, not necessarily. Is there some way to put a planting in that sort of shows where it is? Put signage that just says, please park on the grass to the left here, you know? Something, it can be simple. It doesn't necessarily, we're not saying get out there with, I don't believe the board is saying get out there with paint and stripe everything, but just give a little bit more of a flush out so that, to John's point, as someone enters the site, they have an idea where they should park, where they shouldn't park, and how to do that. And then from the engineering side, just a breakdown per our section 711 of the zoning ordinance parking on how many spaces you need and how many spaces can fit there, with our requirement being 350 square feet for a spot.
I think it should be noted that with the zooming in of the existing plan, I mean, the gravel area that exists, it is clear to anyone driving in where you go. I mean, this is not a bare lawn. So I don't think, I mean, any reasonably cognizant human would park in the gravel lot. And there's probably accommodations. We already accommodate for a big land trust event, which is probably the auction that's held every August, more than 100 cars. I mean, it's not as if there's not enough parking there to accommodate 3 secretaries that might be in the office at one time. But your point is taken. We could accommodate that if need be.
Well, I think, again, Kayla mentioned a valid point about the office use, and it has a requirement. You're the engineer, so, you know, talk to Kayla, look at our regulation, come up with your suggestion how to make sure there's ample parking for the proposed use.
We can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Will there be a gate on this newly created driveway to the barn? I actually agree that it's pretty intuitive now where to park. It might be a little less intuitive after you go from one building to 3 and you have another paved area that goes off to the right. But will there be a gate where it goes through the stone wall?
There'll be a staff-only sign to indicate that that's for the staff and for the tractor functions, not...
So you have a sign that says staff only as you go through the stone wall into that area?
Yeah, as you turn right, there'll be some signage along there that would indicate that it's not, you know, for general public access. And then the whole, actually one of the main points of the design of the structure is that it's hard to figure out what door to walk in now if you go to visit us at the barn. And so one of the points of the way the property is designed and sited off there's currently a gate there, is that the front door will be front and center view with right in front. So you'll know exactly where the path is that takes you to the door that you're supposed to open to find a human.
So maybe just the existing plan, just showing where the existing parking is and where the sign's going to go that's going to state, you know, prohibited or just staff use only or whatever it is.
Right, and there's an information, what's not shown on the landscape sign is if you see that, there actually is there's 2 gaps in the wall, but the one above the word existing, yeah, that gap, that will be the primary gap to the front door of the building. And there's an informational kiosk to the left of that, and we'll be putting a lamppost there as well, and there'll be a path that will take you from the parking lot to the front door. So I think that will be helpful for people as a visual clue.
Right, that serves to delineate to a certain degree the difference between where you come in and where you could park versus the path to the building.
Right.
Well, again...
No, your point's well taken, and I appreciate you making it, and I think it's good. You're right. You can't make it too obvious, and it's in code, and so that's helpful as well.
So the engineer knows what to do on the legend, to create a legend, to define
Thank you.
parking requirements, and to make sure it's covered. And a signage plan would be helpful as well. So even to the point, Ms. Landstreet, where you mentioned the staff-only sign, again, that has to be put onto the plan, so it's understood.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay. So do we want to, well, first of all, I just want to make sure, any additional comment from the public? Okay. So we have we have a request made that for the engineer to make modifications to the existing plan, the site plan, so it takes care of parking. Is there anything else on the site plan that has to be changed, modified, or amended in any way, shape, or form? Board members?
I just have a quick question. Will there be lights on here at night at all? Or just when there's a function?
I think we'll probably keep dark skies and go for just when there's a function, ideally.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's it, staff. Any other comments that should be made to the plan?
I'm going to make one quick comment, which is that there's, in the staff comments, you'll see there's some conversation about a cross-section on the impervious road surface, whatnot. That is incorporated into the plan set here without putting words in Rich's mouth. Rich has looked at that, seems to have no issue with it. When I was writing the staff comments, I hadn't seen those plans and spent time with them yet, so that is in there. It's listed as an outstanding issue. It's been resolved.
So, Kayla, this will be scheduled for next meeting? Okay.
Is there,
We have a motion from Steve.
just wondering why we're continuing versus doing a motion now.
We have site plan modifications that have to come to us.
Could we do those as a condition of approval?
Yeah, you could certainly do that as a condition of approval. If they're straightforward enough, you can defer to staff to make sure that there's signage, as we've discussed tonight. I just ask that we sort of flush out those conditions so that they're directive enough, we know exactly what we're looking for. Alternatively, we could play it very similar to how you did the last one and ask for it to come back to you all. This might be one that ends up being small enough of a change you'd be okay with being done by staff in-house, but it's really at your pleasure.
So we have a motion from Steve to close the public hearing. Can I get a second? Second from Pam. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is closed.
I'd like to make a draft motion to approve the project with conditions of approval as specified. If everybody's in agreement with that.
We have a draft motion on page 18.
Okay. Let's we'll make that one.
Can we talk about how we're going to amend this first? The first point that was brought up had to do with not allowing leasing of office space other than to service organizations. And then an additional condition would be related to either signage or delineation of parking area.
My only question on that is, should it just read office space, or can we read it as office and other building space cannot be leased?
Yeah, that's good.
I don't know. I think that we might want to say office and garage, given that this is only for the proposal was for those purposes, not for the barn.
Yeah, I would say, Joe, it's to where Pam is going with her comment, the only piece is that do they already lease out space in a separate way? I don't know that this approval is taking away those rights, but more so limiting the office space rental.
Garage.
Office space and the storage
That's more germane.
structure.
And then the
Joe, just for a second, let me go back to it's signage and parking, not either or.
which would be conditional approval 22.
Yeah, so
Well,
I'll
actually, the numbering, the conditions, that's,
21
and-
is out, correct.
no, you're completely wrong with the numbers. The first condition says 12, and it should say 1.
Creative.
The first condition of approval on page
You're right.
19
They
says
read
12, and
12.
it should say 1.
Okay.
So we're not.
I did not set you up for success on that.
11,
So it would be, 11 and 12.
Joe, did we, I would like to put in one about the dark sky lighting. To incorporate that, well, lighting.
Just say no parking. The parking lot will not be lit. That way, I mean, they can put lights at doorways, buildings. We're not going to light the parking lot.
Right. But it should still be dark sky lighting, regardless, on the buildings, right?
Define that, Pam.
I don't, well, whatever our, I think consistent with our regulations that we have been trying, yeah.
Residential.
We do have some lighting along the parking lot, along the stone wall there, so that when people are exiting the building at night, but it's on a timer. We don't have it on constantly, so just for events, for safety purposes, but we would be fine with the condition that we're not leaving lights on all night or things like that. But
They shine down on the ground.
they do. They're very
Downward-facing floodlamps, 90 watts.
yeah.
Built into the wall?
No.
That's the trees.
But we don't have any plans to upgrade those. There's nothing shining, out that, is from the roadway or anything like that. There aren't any lights on the road. They're just in the parking lot.
So I think we could just delineate that on the plan, just as we typically do. Mm-hmm. Rich?
You may want to just add the requirement that any additional lighting is dark sky compliant. I think that's what you were saying, Pamela.
You said it so much better.
Any other comments or conditions of approval? No?
I'll make that motion. The South Kingstown Planning Board hereby grants combined conceptual master plan and preliminary plan approval for the South Kingstown Land Trust Bond Major Land Development Project, proposed redevelopment of an existing dwelling unit as a 2 office buildings and storage garage structure, Assessors Plat 80-2, Lot 38, located at 17 Matunic Beach Road. Approval is based on the plan set entitled Proposed Development Plan for the South Kingstown Land Trust, sheets 1 through 4, dated September 4, 2019, prepared by American Engineering, Inc., 400 South County Trail, Suite A201, and landscape plan, planting plan, dated August 8, 2019, as prepared by Clark Farms, Inc. The approval is based on the following findings of fact and conditions of approval. Findings of fact 1 through 9, conditions of approval 1 through 13, with condition 10, excuse me.
It should actually be 12.
Yeah.
Because 10 is out.
Yeah, so condition 10 being changed to reflect the office space and other storage space cannot be leased to anything other than a service organization. 12 being that the site plan delineates the parking and provides for a signage plan. And 13 being the any additional lighting, or 12 being any additional lighting shall be dark sky compliant. I think the one question we still had was on the site plan. I propose that we have them submitted and approved by the staff.
Yeah, that'll be 13.
So 13 is...
Yeah, that's
Approval
that
by
was
staff.
12. 13 was dark sky.
Just so I'm clear for writing this up, it looks like we have the 9 conditions as drafted, horribly numbered as per Microsoft Word and a lack of editing, and 10 is becoming our condition about the leasing of space. 11 is going to be the condition about a final plan with parking and signage. And 13 is, there we go.
We have
What about the staff?
That's added.
Yeah, I think honestly it's implied. That's sort of how final plan goes. So as long as 12 is written to say the final plan shall have those pieces as specifically that, that'll do it.
So we have a motion from Joe. Do we have a second? Second from Elise. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back to our last agenda item.
We're going to no-show.
How you doing? Good to see you. That was longer than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to be out of here like at 7:30 tonight. I'm like, Perry's thing's going to be quick. This is going to be quick. Amazing. Well, it went through. Thanksgiving. Yep, you too.
No.
Saturday.
I think it is.
Good evening. Once again, I'm John Kenyon, attorney for the applicant, Main Street Capital LLC. The property is located at 221 Robinson Street. It's 18,600 square feet in size, and it's in a CD zoning district. We're here for a pre-app. You probably know it better as the Healy News building. And essentially, they're proposing to keep the stores and offices down below, and then do a total of 10 one-bedroom residential units on the second floor, with 8 of them being market rate and 2 of them being designated as affordable. So it appears that they comply with all the requirements. Eric Bell is here tonight if you have any questions of him. Again, it's just a pre-app, we're looking for ideas, but I think we'd also ask that it goes forward, that we be able to combine the master plan and preliminary plan, because I don't think there's going to be much as far as state regulatory requirements for that. Essentially, I think you were just given the survey because the footprint of the building isn't changing significantly, and then you should have received the renderings. I believe you received the survey, which just shows the footprint of the building, which isn't really changing, and then you also have the renderings, which show the proposed architecture.
Can I ask a quick question? So the building is old. I'm assuming there's going to have to be some structural stuff that's going to need to be done for it to carry a second story.
Yeah, Eric Bell, that's correct. It is a steel frame building, so it's, I'm not sure what year it was built, but it is supported with steel. Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. I look at what Brickley's has done for Main Street, and having more residential use on Main Street will bring more people out at night, and I think it'll help businesses thrive more, and I think we'll have more night activity. So I see it as a plus, and look forward to moving the project forward.
I'll also say I see it as a big plus. I also
Yeah. So the Frank Karpowitz did the rendering. That's an actual photo of the building. So the awnings will be removed, yeah, it's sort of a coastal New England shingle style look with nice roof lines and little decks. So that rendering will change a little bit. There's going to be a center hallway where there'll be 5 units in the front and then 5 in the rear. So basically you'll have 5 decks in the front and 5 in the rear.
We showed the plan to Richard Clark out in the hallway, and he also mentioned that he thought it needed bigger planters and more of them.
Yeah.
I definitely want to add my voice to what everybody else has been saying. I think this is a great idea and just really exciting.
Good.
I'm going to jump in with the bad news, only a little bit of it, which is that we don't have you on the agenda for a request to combine review stages. So I think if the board wants to consider that, we'd have to do it at a different meeting just so we don't run afoul of anything in that process. I think well, it's not listed on your agenda, is it? On your agenda for the meeting, it's published as only a pre-app with no decisions issued. And so just, especially considering a project there seems to be a lot of interest in, we're sort of giving a lot of warm support to, we don't want to run afoul of a procedural step on that. But you are more than welcome to submit that for the December 10th meeting and just get it buttoned up if you'd like to do so.
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to, so for the parking, just so that we're all clear, I think that, Kayla, you said that the staff notes, I don't know who developed them, said that the requirements are reduced by 50%.
So I'll tell you what's interesting about this project is it's in a spot where it could work. And so because the commercial downtown district has a couple of specific provisions for parking leniency, where we don't really always have that flexibility in other districts. So one is that 50% reduction in the total requirement on parking. If you ask me, I think that espouses an opinion that we believe there can be parking on the streets in these areas, and there is other municipal parking around, so you can reduce that. The commercial downtown district allows for it in our zoning. Additionally to that, the commercial downtown zoning district lets you put parking on other parcels if you need to, assuming that it's found to be within a walkable distance of the property. So there's some leniency there, which gives this project a little bit more life than it might have had, or less challenges to face otherwise.
And the parking, I believe, is based, there's 2 spots per dwelling unit, and with 1-bedroom units, in reality, you're probably not going to need those 2 spots anyways, and then it gets cut in half. But for this project, I think that the 50% is actually what it probably is going to be.
And are there any specific requirements, given that it's abutting the bike path? And I heard you say that there will be some on the front and some on the back, and so therefore there might be porches on the back. Are there any requirements that we need to think of for that?
Not necessarily. So the setback distances in commercial downtown can be 0. And so they can go right up to it. I think I will say that an opinion I have given the applicant on this is that I like the division of units front and back, because I like the idea of the bike path having a little bit more interaction with the buildings that abut it, as opposed to just running behind things. Right now it feels to run behind them. Dwelling units that face on that actually, I think, creates a vibrancy that we like.
Yeah.
And where on the plan those bollards are shown next to where the tree will someday be, you could also have bike racks.
Having just ridden my bike back there a couple of days ago, I remember looking at the back of the building going, wow, this just screams out for a mural or like a community art project on the back of the building. Just a thought.
Save your paint.
Yeah. Right, that's a good idea.
All right. Might even get an arts grant for it.
Okay. Any feedback to us? Any questions? No? Great. All right. Yeah, thank you. Great project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just before we adjourn, Kayla mentioned the next meeting is December 10th. The week prior to that, you saw another email come your way from Colleen Camp that we're going to have interviews on December 5th. They're going to start at 6, not at 7. And for those of you who can make it, it's not mandatory, but those who can make it, we're going to do it. Are we doing it here? Council chambers? Okay. And also, there was an email from Amy Goins relative to that process, informing us of confidentiality, that we all have a responsibility to confidentiality to deal with the applicants that we're going to be communicating with and interviewing.
And then I'm going to put one more thing, which is, so your regular session meeting is on the 10th. Wednesday, the 11th, is a TRC meeting if we have a representative for TRC.
Maria has done the last two, so we've got to give her a break.
Okay, I did it the two before.
Oh, Maria did the last two. Thank you, Peter. I missed it. Good. Pam? All right, so we have Pam.
All right. Pam, does 9 a.m. work for you?
Mix it up, Pam.
Mix it up. Then we'll go to the afternoon.
All right.
You'll freak out the staff.
After 9:30, I have to do it. I have a meeting at 9, so if you could do it 9:30, that would be great.
Yep, you name a time. 9:30 works for us.
9:30.
Great.
I have motion to adjourn. We have Maria first, second is Steve. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.